What is happening? Are you guys here live with me? Let me know that you're here in the chat. We'll kind of hang out for a minute to cover a couple of things and then we'll get started painting. If you're new here, my name is Paige. I'm the Chief Pixel Pusher and Paintbrusher over at Gumption. And tonight we're going to be painting leaves in watercolor. So if you need to go grab some leaves out of your front yard, feel free to do that. We are going to be actually kind of painting from life, but if it's cold, you have snow where you are, or you don't have any leaves, don't worry. I'm going to have you take a screenshot here in a minute of the leaves that we'll be working with. Let's see. This class will probably last about an hour. If you're here, let me know you're here in chat and say hello. And we will just be using watercolor paints tonight, but if you want to use pen or colored pencil, you're welcome to do that too. Let's get to our colors tonight. So tonight I'm going to be using Core and Daniel Smith colors, probably mostly Core colors. We're going to be mixing our greens tonight. I'm going to change it up on you a little bit and help you out there just mixing up some paint. So you might need some ultra blue if you have it. If not, that's all right. Use what you have. But I'll be using ultramarine blue. I'm using Hansa yellow. I might be using a CAD medium yellow, which is sort of like an Indian yellow. So if you have any of those, you'll be just fine tonight. We'll also be using a burnt sienna and possibly some transparent Pyrrole orange. If you don't have that, that's fine. All you need are yellow and red to make an orange color. And we might be using a warm brown tonight as well. And you also might need a hairdryer tonight. And of course, you're probably going to need paper towels. And you will need a pencil and maybe an eraser too to get you started. Let's see. I think that about covers that stuff. Again, if you're here, let me know you're here in chat. And we will go to, I'm going to do a screenshot here, or I'm going to blow up this screen a little bit so you can take a screenshot of our subject tonight. So let's see. Okay, so I'm going to make this other camera go away maybe. And we'll zoom in here. And you can take a screenshot or take a shot with your phone and just make sure that you get your leaves in there. If not, you can just sketch some leaves. Or if you have leaves from outside, go ahead and grab them and you can paint your own leaves. Awesome. So it looks like Laurel. Hi, Laurel and Andy. I'm so glad you guys are here tonight. They are regulars and they are Patreon supporters, and they got their own leaves tonight. So they'll be painting their own leaves. So they might need different colors, but we'll talk about that next. So hopefully you got the screenshot. We're going to move out of here a little bit. And I'm just going to show you what I did for the promo for this class. So it's going to be real simple. You can arrange your leaves any which way that you would like to, and then we can sketch and draw them. What's great about leaves is they have lots of texture and lots of shape to them and veins, and they leave shadows. And so we're going to paint that tonight. And I really love found object painting because it's really fresh. It's like urban sketching is kind of, right? So you can do it any which way you want. It really, the cool thing about it is it really captures the sense of what you're painting. And honestly, I think it's a great way to make a memory, to remember things by painting things that you see and places that you go. And so if you ever are short on ideas for what to paint, just go outside and grab a branch or a leaf or even a piece of trash would be interesting to paint, depending on the trash, I guess. But what I'm saying is if you're ever feeling bored, there's always something to paint. Okay, so I'm gonna move this out. I don't know if you need a screenshot of this guy too, but if you do, now is your time to take a screenshot of our painted leaves. Okay, so I'm going to turn on my palette cam. I'm happy to have the palette cam back this week. And we're going to get to drawing. So if you have any questions, now's a great time to throw them in my chat there. Kind of what I'm going to do is, you can see, we'll kind of see if we can scooch this down a little bit or get all of this in here. You know, I'm gonna kind of look and see how I want them to be arranged. This one's really interesting because it is curled up and kind of funky. So, whoops, and very delicate. So I'm gonna paint them from my perspective. I suppose if you wanted to take a screenshot of this, you could too, but it's probably going to move out of frame here. So go ahead and take a screenshot if this is what you want to use, and we'll get to painting. Leaves are really fun because they have so much character, and whether they're broken or all in one piece, they're very interesting here. And, you know, I'll give you some tips here. These don't have to be perfect. That's the beauty of nature and buildings and things. They don't have to be perfect because nature is so organic. But when I'm looking at this leaf here, let's switch this over so you can see it. It really is kind of a triangular shape. So when we're drawing, we start with the larger shapes first and then kind of whittle it down to the details. So when you're looking at a shape, you're going to be looking at the overall shape of an item and sketching that in. And usually that's what we do to make sure that our stuff will fit on our paper, that you're not drawing off your paper. So I'm going to start with that, and you know, I always kind of use my pencil too to guide my lines, so I know I'm kind of in the right going the right way. So you kind of start with that overall triangular shape, and I'm just sketching in really lightly here with my pencil. And then I'm going to kind of do this like scallopy edge a little bit. And I'm gonna do that here on the other side. I actually took an online class this week that actually was a watercolor class. I always think it's great to see how other teachers are teaching, and sometimes you have an opportunity to paint subject matter you don't normally paint. So I got an opportunity to paint some crystals with, I believe her name is Isabella Kung. It's Kung. And it was a really delightful class. She actually teaches school where I used to go, where I went to art school, and it's pretty cool. And the class was an etcher class, and it was $5.50, and it was definitely worth the price of admission. So if you're looking for some interesting workshops, etcher is spelled E-T-C-H-R, no E in there. Had some good workshops. So we'll probably be doing, our subject matter was a crystal, and so I was thinking, oh, that'd be really fun to do something like that with you guys, where we're focusing on light. So, okay. So then I'm just moving on to my next guy here. Overall kind of shape. Almost makes me think of a weird fish or something. Just sketching these in here. This one doesn't really have it has a little bit of scalloping, but you know, you can kind of rough up the edge there. And he kind of curls up here. Okay, let's see. And this guy, he's going to be a little tricky. I'm going to get this kind of swooshy part here. Okay. I guess the question for you guys is, are you ready for fall? I think I am. I'm not minding these cooler temps. Kind of get me in the holiday spirit a little. And it's going to be Halloween, so the kids are going to be trick-or-treating or faux trick-or-treating maybe this year. Hopefully they get to get out in their costumes and have a little bit of fun. Okay, all right. So I think I'm doing pretty good. You guys let me know if you need a little bit more time. I'm gonna lighten up some of my pencil marks here and actually maybe add some veins to this guy, and then we will get to painting. And we don't want to forget our shadows, actually, so I was just about ready to do that. So I'm just going to kind of loosely sketch in my shadows here. I've got a few different shadows on my desk because I've got more than one light source here happening. And you can just lightly sketch those in. The closer they are to the table, the darker. We're going to have a little shadow here. And of course we have their stem here, has a little shadow. Okay, so I'm feeling good about this. I'm gonna get my eraser all rolled up and then kind of just gently roll it so I can lighten and pick up some of this extra. Now this would be a really fun one to use salt in for this texture here. I might have added just a couple of granules here, but if not, we can do a little bit of layering technique in order to create this texture. Because you can see this leaf. Maybe it'll focus here. Oh, come on, focus. Well, you know, you kind of get the idea, right? It's got some nice texture there. Okay, so what am I going to do first? I'm going to mix up some paint here, and I'm going to switch us to our palette cam. Maybe you'll be able to see this. Okay. So I'm going to mix a little of my Hansa yellow. I'm going to be making my own green here. And you cannot see that. Let's see. This is a really pretty, cool, vibrant yellow. And I'm going to get some ultramarine blue to create this green color. Now that's a pretty, feels kind of neon-y green a little bit. I'm going to get a little more water and a little more pigment here. Now this is how you determine whether you're going to have a warmer yellow or a cooler yellow by how much of each one of these colors you put in here. Like I just made this a much darker kind of green. But our green is pretty muted. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to find a red here. I have this, it's kind of almost an ultramar or a alizarin crimson. And that can knock down your vibrancy a little bit. So let's see if I can get this so you can see it. So red is the complement of green. And if you use red in green, it will tone it down and vice versa. So I still feel like I need a little bit of more yellow to lighten this up just a tad. And it's always kind of a good rule of thumb to use a scrap paper when you're making colors. Like I like this. This is a pretty good color. So I think I'm going to use that. Now, if you have any questions about colors, if you have your own leaves, go ahead and throw them in the chat if you're a little have some questions. So I'm taking a look at this leaf, and from my perspective is going to be a little bit different than the camera's perspective, but I see that there is more shading here, and there's a little shading here, and some shading in here that kind of gives it this shape. So I'm going to try to mimic that as I'm painting this. But first, I'm going to rinse off my brush, make sure it's clean. I am going to work wet and wet, so I'm going to wet this with my brush first so I can see, I can just make sure that there's water all over here because I'm going to drop in color. And you can move your paper around so you can see where it's wet. Sometimes it dries really fast. And you can also use this to kind of move your water around so it's more even, it's not puddling. Okay, and I'm taking my paper towel. I got a different area wet, which I didn't want to. So now I'm going to drop in my green. You got to make sure that you kind of mix it up and make sure that's mixed. And you can just drop it in there. See how it kind of just starts going to town? That's what I really like about core watercolors, is they move beautifully. Okay. And I see like a little bit of shadow here. And you can just kind of keep infusing areas with pigment so it will kind of move, and also create a darker area there because I want a shadow here. And this is probably at a point where I really am liking this a lot. I might actually drop in a little bit of, maybe a little bit of a warmer color, because if you can see in these speckles at all, you know, we've got some warm tones in there too. So I've put some orange here on my really diluted here in my palette. You could use a quinacridone coral, and you could just drop it into your wet places here a little bit. This might be looking a little more vibrant than my leaf itself, but I just really love these subtle touches of warmth. And they'll kind of diffuse, and most watercolor paint kind of lightens as it dries. So that looks good to me. I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to move on to another leaf. So I've got these two leaves, they're close in color. So I'm going to mix up some burnt sienna, which is a really lovely earthy tone. And maybe mix a little more orange here, so we have a little more vibrant tone. Let's see if I can show you this in the palette cam, so you can kind of see what colors I'm using here. If you don't have burnt sienna, if you have some sort of brown color, that will work too. We want it a little warm, so even if you had a brown and you added some orange to it, that would warm it up a little. So I'm gonna do the same thing over here with this leaf. And I'm gonna make note of where I have shadows and where I have more light areas. And I'm gonna start dropping in this burnt sienna. I love how this paint works. It's sort of like a whisper of color. I'm going to do it along this side too, because this side curves up and it has a bit of a shadow. Draw that color down. You might have to keep kind of gently adding color. I might bring some orange in here too. And when you're working this way, wet into wet, you know, you don't get those hard edges until it starts drying. So it's a great time to just keep adding pigment. And I'm not sure what size this is. This might be, I don't know, a 5 or a 6 maybe, round brush. If you're concerned about that size and you have questions about that. And you can see wherever you drag this bead here, wherever you let it go, it leaves a little bit of pigment there. So if you have, this is a great time to also pull out your light. So maybe you've got a little bit of light here. So I've just dabbed off my brush and I can just drag this through here. And that helps me create light without any hard edges. I can do that over here too. Awesome, right? So I'm going to let this dry here, and I'm going to move over to this leaf here. This one is a little bit more, it's lighter, it's not as rich as this one is. Even this is a little richer than that, but I think I'm going to maybe use a little Hansa here. And let's see what happens when we use a little bit of burnt sienna. Maybe dab in a little green. So you can see here in my main camera, you can see the difference between this color and this color. It's a little bit lighter. So I'm going to try to preserve some of that still in my palette here. I'm going to clean off my brush and we're going to do that same wet and wet technique. And if I'm moving too fast for you guys, just let me know and I can slow it down. It was really nice last week was Patreon Thursday, and so I was Zooming with my patrons, and it was really nice because I could talk to Laurel and Andy and hang out there with them, and it's definitely helpful when you can hear from your class. So it was really nice. All right, so this looks good and wet. Now I haven't done the stems here yet, and I'm waiting because this one is a lighter color. I may do a thin line here, we'll see. Probably have to repaint it, but I'm gonna start dropping in this yellow, kind of a warm yellow color. You see how that just spreads? It's amazing. And I'm just spreading the color around here, making sure that I cover this leaf. Whoops. I colored outside the line. And this portion here is going to be darker because it's in shadow. It's partly in shadow. So I'm going to dip into my darker color here and kind of dab it in. And maybe this is spreading to a place that I don't want. Never fear, I dip my brush in clean water and then I can clean up this edge a little bit, which will dry this area a little. Go back in and add some pigment here. And this part has a little bit, it's in shadow too. Just let it sit there. Okay. And I have this portion here is in a little bit of shadow too. We'll see if that spreads a bunch. Looking pretty good here. So now if you want to pull out some lights, you can do that now. So I colored outside my lines a little bit here. Just going to soften this edge a little. Okay, so I'm going to leave that alone and let it dry. And kind of assess where we're at here in our other leaves. So this one feels pretty dry. I'm going to go in and use the same color here that I mixed with my Hansa yellow and a little bit of burnt sienna and a little green, and I'm going to use that for the stem of that brush. Now you can use a really teeny tiny paintbrush for this, or you can try to use one that has a fine point on it. I'm going to use this little teeny tiny brush to see if I like it for this one. And I'm just going to do wet on dry here. Paint this in a little bit. Now if you had a Misket or a Frisket or what else do they call it? Masking gum, you could use that here. I'm going to try to paint around this a little bit because I'm lazy and I like being able to do it without using masking fluid. I'm going to just add a little extra yellow here. And the reason I say that is I'm going to paint in this shadow here, but I'm going to do it without masking it, by golly. I'm going to hit this other stem too. It's basically the same color. It gets darker here at this end. You can add a little of this burnt sienna. Just dab it in. This one's a little bit darker here at the end. Just mixing that green that we mixed with a little burnt sienna in here, and it is working wonders. Okay. So this portion of this leaf is lighter. And you know, you can always mask those out. And you know, I learned a great tip in that class that I took the other day, so I'm going to share it with you guys too. So you can always use something like this, which this is a masking pen, which I really liked. But you can always use a brush, although I'd probably use a brush that I wasn't extremely fond of, but you can get a brush that's thin like this, and you get a little dish of soap. It doesn't matter what kind of soap it is. You dip your brush in the soap, and then if you have a jar of Misket, you can dip your soap-soaked brush into your Misket, and you can just put your Misket down, and then it makes it so it's easy to get off your brush. So this was a great tip that I learned this week, and I have yet to try it, but it's a good tip. But tonight we're gonna not worry about Misket here. So there's a couple of things that you can do at this point if you want to lighten an area. Like here, you can take a clean brush with water in it, and you can scrub along the area that you would like to lighten. And if your paint is the kind that lifts easily, you can easily lift out those areas. Or you can use gouache, or you can take a darker color. So I'm going to take this green that we used, and you can put it along the side of this area and see if that will help it stand out a little bit. So I'm just going to use this green actually to go along the side here and kind of put in these veins in darker areas. Like this curls up a little here. I think that this is the kind of painting that is relaxing. You can just kind of get lost with this and relax a little bit. And oops, I'm scooching all these guys together. Okay. So I'm just putting in some of these a little bit darker areas and the veins a little bit with this darker green color. What's nice about this really skinny pen is I can get really fine details if I want to. And I'm just gonna kind of darken some of this a little bit. The thing about being able to mix your green, if you take a good look at my palette here, you see how it kind of separates, the color separates. Well, it also does that on your paper a little bit, and it creates some really interesting colorways here and textures. So if you look right here, there's lots of blue here, and then it kind of warms up in these other areas. Okay. Now I see here in this area there's more shadow here. I could add it. So I'm going to dip my other brush and mix my paint a little bit. And just kind of run it over here. And I can see here from this angle, if I squint my eyes, I can see there's a little shadow here. So I might just softly paint this in here, and then I'm going to soften this edge. So I just dabbed my brush on a paper towel. I'm just going along that edge to create that soft transition. All right. I can see another area here. Soften it just a little bit. Awesome. I'm feeling like it looks like a leaf. So to finish this leaf off, I need to put a little shadow in there. So I'm gonna use some odalite, which is, it looks a lot like Payne's Gray here, so you can see it here. It's really, can get really dark. So I'm gonna just add a little water. This isn't, I can tell you it has more water and less pigment. It probably will wind up being fairly dark, but I'm just wanting to do a real light wash here. So it's looking like it's going to do that. So I'm going to try to work fast. I'm just running along the stem here because I didn't want to miss that. Running along the edge here. So what I can do, if this is still wet, I can go back in and get a little more pigment and put that dark pigment close to the edge of the leaf. And then it will nicely spread. Kind of create this nice shadow. Now, I just dipped my brush in water and I'm just softening this edge just a little. I also need to remember to do this portion. And of course, where it's closer, it'll be less diffused. And then there's also a shadow right here. It's a cast shadow. You may not be able to see it there, but from my viewpoint, it's darker a little bit than this shadow. So I'm going to get a little more pigment here. I'm just going to paint it in where that edge is. All right. Okay, so I'm going to move on to these other leaves. You can continue to work on these. If you really want to paint in the veins and really do that, you can do that. And like I said, you can use gouache if you want to do that. You could use a gel pen if you wanted to lighten that up. You could mix gouache with your green. And maybe we'll do that if we have a little time. And then you'll create a not a transparent, but an opaque green there that will lighten that up. For this one, so I have my burnt sienna here. I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue to it, and it creates this really nice dark color. Can you see that? It's like a nice gray brown color. It's a great alternative for a dark brown. And I'm going to put it in this area here where this is a little bit curled. Soften out that edge. Actually, I can see that it extends here a little bit. And any area that you see in this leaf or your leaf that might need a shadow, I think I'm going to try to soften that a little. And you know, you could always use salt if you want to give this some texture. If you want to give it texture now, we could see. So a little burnt sienna, you can drop in, kind of drop in here, dop, is that the right word? Dab. Dab in here. To give it texture. I like to use really light, very much watered down pigment because it will leave a nice kind of subtle color variation there for you. It's pleasing to the eye. So I am going to leave that and I'm going to grab this guy, and I can see from my angle here we have this vein that kind of goes down the center. So with my skinny little brush, I think now I'm going to work on the shadow for this guy. So again, we're using a Payne's gray or a sodalite color, or just a dark color. Maybe you've got a black or a dark gray. And I'm going to give this guy a shadow and try not to get any wet areas, but we're pretty safe here. Again, I can take some of my pigment, add a little more pigment to my water to create a darker shadow and drop it in here where this leaf is closest to the table. And while it's wet, it will diffuse nicely. Okay. All right, moving right along to our other leaf. So this guy might need a little bit more layering. So I'm gonna get a little bit more of this burnt sienna. I'm just gonna have it available to me here on the side. And then I have this nice kind of browny color. Might need a little more, ultra blue, because this area of my leaf is pretty dark because it is in shadow and I want it to feel like it's in shadow. So I'm just bringing this color in here. And if I need to diffuse it a little, I'm just going to clean off my brush a little, gently soften this edge. And then I see some darker areas. Let's see if I can scooch this down. Here I see a darker area, and here I see some shadowing. So I can run my burnt sienna kind of along here. Soften this edge a little. And actually, I think I'm going to start with my burnt sienna here. That way we can kind of define some of this here, running it along the veins. Okay, and this guy's kind of at a weird angle, but it's also curving. Use some of this dark brown under here. So if you don't have a brown in your arsenal, just remember burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. It's a great color combination. You can actually do lots of painting with just those two color combinations. So then I'm going to kind of put this in the area where we ran that burnt sienna again. So interestingly, you know, I'm part of this group that is in Facebook. It's a watercolor group, and there are lots of beginners in that group and beyond. And I saw an interesting comment the other day where somebody was talking about, well, they didn't want to paint what other people paint. They wanted to create their own stuff, which is admirable. Of course, everybody gets to that point, right? Once they've learned how to use painting and understand a little more about paints, you know, you're going to move on. But the truth of the matter is, the only way to truly, you know, it's good to paint with other people and to do tutorials. I think that was the big problem that they had, was doing tutorials. And I think tutorials are really good because sometimes it's hard to get out and to do your painting. And the only way that you're going to do it is if you can follow along with something else. Maybe you're busy and, you know, you don't want to have to think up something to paint. You just want to paint. Tutorials are great that way. So I don't think they should be discounted. Maybe you're not always going to need tutorials or to take a class. You'll paint on your own and be able to find your own subject matter. But it's how everyone has had to learn. You know, that's how I learned when I was in school. I had to take a class, and we all had to, paint the same thing. And I like to have my classes have people's work be able to be a little bit different than others. Like if you have different leaves, then you have a different look. And I think that's really great because you can own it, but it's enough like everyone else's, right? But we all have to start somewhere, and that is true for all of us. So if you struggle with watercolor painting, don't worry. It gets easier, and everybody had to start somewhere, so don't be discouraged by what you see other people doing. We all start somewhere. Okay, so let's see. Now I am going to put the shadow on this guy. We're really close to an hour, and I want to respect your guys' time here. So I'm going to paint in the shadow using the same technique that we did for our other shadows. And I'm leaving a little more pigment here. I'm going to grab some more dark pigment straight out of the paint and tap this in here. Okay. And then I'm going to hit the other side. Just add a little more water in here. Soften this edge a little. Dab in a little bit of pigment here. Okay, quickly I think I'm going to try to add some veins into this guy, and then we'll probably be close to done for tonight. But see how this paint separates too? It really is beautiful the way the colors are. This is kind of the little shadow that comes on the side of these little veins. Okay. And I'm going to darken this in just a little. Maybe darken here. Too. Awesome. So let me know how you guys are doing with yours. Did I move too fast for you? I'm going to zoom in on this just a little. You can kind of see it a little better. All right, let's see. So let me know in the comments if you have any questions. yeah, leave them below. I want to say a big thank you to my Patreon supporters, Laurel and Colin and gang. I appreciate you guys being here. You guys are here consistently all the time. And it was really fun Zooming with you here last week. So if you want to get on that action, you can be part of the Gumption gang over there at Patreon. If not, you will see me here almost every Thursday except for the first Thursday of the month and when we do our Patreon class. If you want to check out my calendar, I'm really trying to get ahead of these classes. So we know what we're going to do in advance, so you can go check out my calendar at ihavegumption.com and hit the calendar button, and then you should see on the calendar some imagery that you can click on. It will give you direct links to our live classes and let you know what you need and for class and what's happening. So really use that as a tool. I'm trying to really be on top of that right now, and so it's a great tool. If you have any questions or comments, you can always leave them in chat. And if you'd like to see some certain things here that you want to paint or try to paint, go ahead and leave that for me. I'm going to move this. That will help a lot. Leave that for me in chat too, or let me know while we're chatting here. I like painting what you guys want to see, and we don't always have to do watercolor. It's kind of like the thing that we do here, but we most definitely are going to be exploring colored pencils and those kinds of things too. So we'll change it up here once in a while to you. Thank you, Laurel. I'm glad that you had a good time here. I'm glad that you tuned in, and I hope you have a good weekend too. Give the fam a squeeze for us. And I guess that's all I have for you guys. If you don't have any questions for me. And you have a whole arsenal now of live classes that you can check out. They're usually about an hour. And you can go ahead and check those out when you have a free minute. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here. If you want to find me on the social webs, you can find me there. And until next time, keep painting, keep creating, and being creative. And thanks very much. I'll see you next time. Maybe.